The air in King's Landing was heavy with danger, and Lord Eddard Stark felt it in his bones. Every corner whispered treachery. Ever since King Robert died and Cersei took control, the city no longer belonged to him. Varys had warned him softly, with that calm, eerie tone of his, "You have a chance, Lord Stark, but only if you act now." That night, Ned didn't sleep. He sat by the window in his chambers, listening to the distant clanging of swords, the drunken laughter of Lannister guards, and the silence that followed his every move. He knew he couldn't trust anyone, not Petyr, Baelish, not Renly, not even the Gold Cloaks. They had all shown their masks, but he could trust one thing, his instincts, and his instincts told him to run. By morning, the plan was set. Varys had arranged for a small merchant ship to leave the Blackwater Bay at dusk. Arya had been found by Syrio Forel and hidden safely in the city's underbelly. Sansa, though heartbroken about Joffrey, was convinced by Ned's soft but stern words that her safety mattered more than her love. He didn't tell them everything, just enough, just what they needed to know. As the sun dipped low, cloaking the city in a red-orange hue, Ned Stark wrapped his daughters in dark cloaks and led them through the quietest back alleys. No guards, no banners, just shadows and fear. Arya walked beside him, alert, her hand never leaving the hilt of needle. Sansa followed quietly, her face pale, eyes wide. She had once dreamed of being queen. Now she just wanted to live. They passed the street of silk, the market square, and finally reached the hidden dock behind a fishmonger's shack. The ship was waiting. It was small, old, but fast. The captain was a Braavosi man who didn't ask questions. He just nodded and helped them aboard. As the boat pulled away from the city, Ned looked back. King's Landing shimmered in the distance, golden and rotten. He felt shame for running, but not regret. He had tried honor. It had nearly killed him. Now he would try something else, survival, far behind them. Petyr Baelish watched from the shadows, a smirk twisting his lips. Interesting, he muttered to himself, already planning how to spin this. The next morning, word spread like wildfire through the Red Keep. Ned Stark has vanished. The Northman has fled. Cersei was furious. Joffrey howled in rage. The council was in chaos, and the Game of Thrones had taken a sharp, unexpected turn. Meanwhile, the ship sailed toward White Harbor. Ned Stark sat on the deck, Arya sleeping beside him, Sansa curled up in blankets below. His thoughts raced of Winterfell, of Robb, of war. The war was coming, no doubt about that. But now, he would face it on his terms, not as a prisoner, but as a father and a Stark. The North remembers, and now it would rise. The sea was rough on the second night, and the waves slammed against the ship like the rage of gods. Arya stood near the railing, hair tangled by the wind, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. She wasn't scared, not really, but something deep inside her told her that this was only the beginning. Below deck, Sansa barely spoke. She wrapped herself in her cloak, clutching a small wooden comb, one of the last things she had from her room in the Red Keep. She missed Septa Mordane. She missed her dresses. Most of all, she missed the lie that everything would be okay if she just stayed good and smiled. Ned checked on them both through the night. He kept his sword, Ice, close by, though it was far too large for ship fighting. It was more a symbol, now a reminder of who he was, or who he used to be. By the time they reached White Harbor, the ship slid into the fog like a ghost. Lord Wyman Manderley welcomed Ned quietly and swiftly, ushering him and his daughters into his halls. There was no celebration, only urgency. The raven from King's Landing had already arrived. Cersei had declared Ned a traitor. Joffrey had taken the throne, and a bounty had been placed on the Starks, dead or alive, that night. Ned stood before the fireplace in Manderley's hall, Wyman seated in his great chair, his large hands folded together. "Your presence here is dangerous," Wyman said, his voice low but respectful. "The North will stand behind you, but you must get to Winterfell." "I don't want war," Ned replied. "But it seems war has come for us." Indeed, it had. In Winterfell, Robb Stark had already begun rallying. Bannerman, when the Raven from White Harbor arrived, carrying word of his father's escape and safe return, he breathed for the first time in days. But the news of King Robert's death and Joffrey's rise turned that breath into a growl. Robb knew he had no choice now. The South had betrayed his father. The Iron Throne had chosen blood and lies. He would not let them take Winterfell next. As Ned rode with Arya and Sansa toward home, he passed through village after village, each one more loyal than the last. People bowed, whispered prayers, and cried at the sight of him. The North remembered, and now it burned. But not all eyes were friendly. In a smoky tavern just south of the Neck, a cloaked figure sipped ale, listening to travelers speak of the Stark Lord who had fled death and returned to the land of wolves. His gold hair caught the firelight for a moment before he tucked it back under his hood. Jaime Lannister had ridden north alone, against Cersei's orders, against the council's wishes. He didn't care about thrones or politics. He cared about honor and how a man like Ned Stark could still have it, even after betrayal. Far to the east, Varys moved his pieces carefully. He had helped Ned escape, not out of kindness, but for the realm. Chaos, after all, was a ladder, and in that chaos he would build something new. Back in Winterfell, the gate opened, and Ned Stark returned to his home. Maester Luwin greeted him with tears in his eyes. Robb ran down the steps and embraced his father tightly. Arya beamed at Jon Snow, who had come from Castle Black under mysterious leave, and Savasi, she simply looked up at the towers of Winterfell and whispered, "We're safe now." Right, Ned didn't answer. He couldn't lie anymore, not even to comfort her. Because in the south, Cersei Lannister was sharpening her claws, and Tywin Lannister had just turned his army north. The war hadn't been stopped. It had only just begun. Winterfell's halls had never felt so cold, even with the fires burning. Ned Stark was home, but the weight of what he had seen and escaped from still sat heavy on his shoulders. He had fled the lion's den. Yes, but now he stood in the path of the storm that was coming straight for the north. Robb Stark had grown. Ned noticed it instantly. His boy had become a man in a matter of moons, shoulders squared, voice firm, eyes full of fire. "We must strike first," Robb said, pacing the great hall. "They will come for us, whether we wait or not." But Ned shook his head. "We are not the aggressors. The North does not start wars. We end them when we must." Arya, who had started training again with Jon in the courtyard, overheard every conversation she could. She was like a shadow now, quieter, sharper. The escape from King's Landing had changed her. She had seen too much, and she was no longer a little girl waiting to be a lady. She wanted a sword in her hand and vengeance in her heart. Sansa, meanwhile, was struggling. She walked the corridors of Winterfell with empty eyes. Her dreams were broken. Her love for Joffrey had turned to confusion, then hatred, then nothing. She rarely ate, barely spoke, and only seemed to come alive when she sat beside her little sister. The sisters, once so different, now clung to each other like castaways on a frozen shore. The North rallied, but the realm was not silent. Raven. After Raven arrived, Cersei's lies spread faster than wildfire. She accused Ned of plotting against the crown, of kidnapping his daughters, of betraying the realm. Her words were poison, and some southern lords drank them eagerly, but not all, lady. Catelyn, who had remained at Riverrun with her father, returned to Winterfell with grim news. Tywin Lannister marches, 10,000 men. They are coming north. Ned listened in silence, then stood. Then we must be ready. Yet deep in the Godswood, where the weirwood trees whispered with red leaves and old blood, Ned prayed, "Old gods, guide me. I have done what I thought was right. I spared my girls. I spared my honor, but I fear it was not enough." Jon Snow sat beside Arya one evening, under the fading sun. "He's not the same," Jon said, nodding toward Ned. "None of us are." Arya just nodded, staring at the dirt. "I saw them kill people in the streets. I saw them lie with smiles on their faces. I won't be that stupid ever again." Jon frowned. "You're not stupid, Arya." "No," she said softly, "but I was innocent." In the dead of night, a raven landed in the rookery, bearing a scroll sealed in black wax. Maester Luwin brought it to Ned immediately. It bore no signature, only a warning. "Your head is still wanted, and now so are your sons. The lion roars. Northward, winter will bleed." Ned crushed the parchment in his fist. The banners of the North were raised the next morning. From Bear Island to the Dreadfort, from White Harbor to the last hearth, the direwolf howled again. The North was preparing not just for battle but for vengeance, and far to the south, on the red steps of the Iron Throne, Joffrey Baratheon screamed, in rage as his mother whispered poison in his ear. The Starks ran once. Cersei said coldly, "Let's see if they run again." But Ned Stark was done running. Snow had started falling in small, quiet flakes, the kind that didn't stick yet, but warned of the long winter creeping in. In Winterfell, the courtyard was alive with activity soldiers drilling, blacksmiths hammering, ravens flying in and out with news and threats. The Stark banner flew high, but every man knew this wasn't just defense anymore. It was a call to arms. Robb was restless. He wanted to ride. He wanted blood. Every time he looked at his father, he saw pain hidden behind stern eyes. "We can't wait for them to bring war to our gates, father. We must ride south and meet them." But Ned held his ground. "They'll expect us to be angry, rash, foolish. That's what the Lannisters want." Robb paced, fists clenched. "They call you a traitor. They insult our name. They threaten Bren, Rickon, even Mother. How long do we wait before the wolf bares its teeth?" In the Godswood, Sansa knelt beside the old heart tree. Her prayers had grown desperate, scattered, almost childlike. "Please," she whispered, "just let us have peace. Let us go back to how things were. Let Joffrey forget us." But Joffrey hadn't forgotten. In King's Landing, he had ordered the execution of loyal northern families still living in the capital. Cersei, ever composed, had spun it as justice. Varys watched in silence, his face unreadable. The spider knew that every death, every insult, every act of cruelty was only fueling something older than thrones. Revenge. Arya didn't pray anymore. She trained every day with wooden swords, then real ones. She begged Jon to teach her more than tricks she wanted to kill, to fight. Jon hesitated at first, but he saw the fire in her eyes, the grief buried beneath her small frame. "All right," he said one night, handing her a small dagger. "But you train hard, you don't play." She nodded, gripping it tightly. "I don't play anymore." And in the shadows of Winterfell, ravens began to disappear. Ned suspected a traitor, but couldn't find them. Ravens never reached some of their allies. Some bannermen were slow to respond. One night, Theon Greyjoy came to Ned in the dark. "You're being watched, your every move." Ned narrowed his eyes. "By who?" Theon shrugged. "I don't know, but I know what betrayal smells like, and Winterfell stinks of it." Elsewhere, in the Riverlands, Tywin Lannister's army moved like a wave of fire. Villages burned, men were slaughtered, women taken. He was making a message clear: defy the crown, and this is your reward. Robb couldn't take it any more. With his father's reluctant blessing, he rode south with half the Stark army. Ned would hold Winterfell with the rest and protect the younger children. But something twisted in his gut as he watched Robb ride away. He had once fled to save his daughters, now he sent his son into the lion's jaws. That night, another raven arrived, this time from Stannis, Baratheon. Ned read the words by candlelight, alone. When he finished, he didn't move for a long while. The true heir, the bastard. King the lie Robert never knew. Ned had run from King's Landing to avoid war. But the truth had followed him. And now he had to decide: protect his family and remain silent, or unleash the truth and risk destroying everything. In the cold silence of his study, Ned whispered to himself, "If I stay silent, I lose my soul. If I speak, I lose my blood." But the North remembered, and the truth had claws. The fire in Ned Stark's chambers burned low, casting long shadows on the stone walls. He held the parchment from Stannis in his hand, the wax seal cracked, but the words burning hotter than any flame. The truth was simple and damning. Joffrey was no rightful king. Cersei's children were born of incest. Robert Baratheon's blood did not flow in their veins. Ned had known it in King's Landing. He had confronted Cersei once, foolishly, thinking honesty and honor would protect the realm, but that path nearly got him killed. Now, the same truth lay before him again, and it felt like a sword at his throat. He met with Maester Luwin in secret. "If we release this truth," Ned whispered, "we split the realm open. But if we hide it, we leave monsters on the throne." Face was pale. "Do you trust Stannis?" "No," Ned said after a pause. "But I trust that he is a man of law, and law is better than madness." The next morning, Ned summoned a raven. The message was short, signed by the hand of the king in exile, and sealed with the direwolf sigil. It flew west with the truth, toward the Vale, toward the Riverlands, and toward the ears of any lord still brave enough to defy a crown-soaked. In lies. Robb, meanwhile, had reached the twins. Walder Frey, slippery and sour as ever, agreed to let the Stark army pass, but not without a price: his daughter's hand for a future marriage. Robb swallowed his pride and agreed. He wasn't thinking of love now, only war. The Stark host met the Lannister forces on the field near the Whispering Wood, and there Robb proved what kind of wolf he truly was. They struck at night, silent, swift, ferocious. Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, was captured, his golden armor muddy and bent, his face bloodied but defiant. Robb didn't gloat. He stood over the prisoner, staring into the eyes of the man who had pushed his little brother from a tower. "You're lucky my father still believes in justice," Robb said coldly, "because I'd slit your throat right now." Back in Winter, Arya watched the younger children while Sansa began assisting Maester Luwin, her old self dreamy, soft, blind to cruelty, had died somewhere between the Red Keep and the ship that carried her north. Now she asked questions, studied politics, learned about the lords of West. Quietly, bitterly, she was becoming what her mother once was, a lady with a blade behind her smile. Then the betrayal came. At dawn, 3 ravens flew from Winterfell, not from Ned nor Luwin. Someone inside had sent messages to King's Landing, warning them Theon had been right. That evening, Ned gathered his household guard. "We are being watched," he said. "There is a traitor among us. Someone who would see my daughters dragged back to the lion's den and my sons slain in the field." His voice broke slightly on the word daughters. He thought of Arya, so fierce and fragile. Sansa hardened too soon. He had failed them once. He would not fail again. That night, a guard spotted a cloaked figure sneaking out near the stables. The man was caught and dragged before Ned. It was Maester Qyburn, a southern healer who had begged for shelter weeks ago, claiming he had been cast out by Lannisters. Ned had allowed him to stay. Foolishly, under interrogation, Qyburn revealed everything. He was Cersei's rat, feeding her updates on Winterfell's movements, feeding her names, weaknesses, why. Arya asked coldly as she stood beside her father. Why serve someone who burns people alive and calls it love? Qyburn just smiled. Because monsters are always better fed than heroes. Ned had him. Hanged at dawn, and far to the south, in King's Landing, Cersei received Qyburn's last raven before he was caught. Her green eyes narrowed. "Prepare the gold cloaks," she said, "and send word to the Boltons. Because if the North wanted to play at war, then let them drown in their own blood." Winter had arrived early in the north. The skies were iron grey, and the wind howled like ghosts through the towers of Winterfell. Fires roared in every hearth, but the cold still clung to every stone. Ned Stark stood at the battlements, watching the road vanish into white mist. He knew what was coming. He could feel it like a blade against the back of his neck. Robb's army had won its first battle. Jaime Lannister was in chains, but the victory had stirred a hornet's nest. Cersei had moved quickly, twisting truths, calling on old debts, and promising lands and titles to northern traitors. And the Boltons had answered her call. Ramsay Snow, the bastard of the Dreadfort, rode with Lannister gold in his pocket and cruelty in his eyes. His father, Roose Bolton, quiet and calculating, stayed behind. He waited like a vulture, letting the war bleed its prey before picking at the bones. The raven from Robb reached Ned in the dead of night. "The Boltons have turned. Beware the Dreadfort." "I ride east." Ned's heart sank. He had trusted Roose. Not loved him, never liked him, but trusted. And now the cracks in the north were showing. The north remembered, yes, but not all of it remembered loyalty. Arya demanded to fight. "Let me ride south with Robb," she begged. "I can be a scout, a blade. I'm not a child anymore." But Ned refused. "You are a child," he said, sternly, "and I won't lose another to war." She stormed off. She didn't cry. She never cried anymore. Instead, she sat in the armory, sharpening her blade, the dagger Jon had given her, over and over, until the metal gleamed with anger. Sansa, too, was changing. She helped manage supplies, organized ravens, read letters with her father. She asked questions, no longer out of curiosity, but survival. "If the Boltons are close," she said, "shouldn't we send the younger children away?" Ned nodded slowly. "You'll take them to the wall." To Jon, it was a hard choice, but the only one. Jon had written from Castle Black, asking about the chaos below. Ned hadn't told him everything, but enough. And Jon had promised if the worst came, Winterfell's blood would find safety beyond the wall. The next day, Sansa, Arya, Rickon, and a small escort rode north under heavy guard. Sansa kissed her father's cheek. Arya hugged him tightly. "If you fall," she whispered, "I'll kill them all." Ned smiled sadly. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." Robb met the Bolton forces near the Weeping Water. The battle was brutal. Fire and steel, wolves and flayed men. But in the end, Robb's rage carved a path through the enemy. Ramsay fell not in glory, but screaming, his face half burned, begging for mercy. Robb gave him none, but the cost was heavy. Thousands dead, allies shaken, and in King's Landing, Cersei smiled when she heard of it. The North might win battles, but she knew how wars were really won, by bleeding the will of the people until they begged for peace. Yet something happened she hadn't planned. Stannis marched. The Raven arrived with flames on its tail. Stannis Baratheon, with Melisandre at his side and fire in his heart, had raised his banner. He declared Joffrey false, declared Ned Stark innocent, and demanded all lords choose between lies and law. The realm was now divided, not just between Lannister and Stark, but between shadow and fire. Ned gathered his council. "This war is no longer about revenge. It's about the future. We fight not for thrones, but for truth." The Northern lords rallied once more, fiercer this time, angrier. They had seen fire. They had buried sons. Now they wanted justice. And Ned, he stood taller. He had fled King's Landing with only fear and his daughters. Now he had returned with fire behind him, banners beside him, and a realm beginning to see through the lies. He had chosen survival over honor once. Now he would take both. The war for the North had begun, and this time the wolf was hunting.